Hi, hello and welcome. I'm Sophie Messager. I'm a doula and neonatal teacher and healer based in Cambridge, UK. And today I'm going to talk to you about the everything I can think of about the Rebozo. And I hope you will find this interesting and entertaining. And please feel free to comment and ask questions. I would like to make this as interactive as possible. I think it'd be a lot more interesting if those of you who are watching me come and say hello and come and ask as many questions as you can. So I'll tell you a bit about myself first, and then I'm going to tell you about what I'm going to be talking about. What would be really helpful as well is if one of you who is watching me right now could comment and then let me know if you can hear me well and everything is working as it should. So me, Sophie Messager, I'm French, as you can hear from my accent. I came to this country, to the UK, 20 years ago as a biology research scientist. I spent 20 years being a biology research scientist. And then when I had my first child, my son, he's 12 now, I had a doula supporting me through the birth. And it was incredibly empowering as an experience and incredibly positive. Hello, Sophie. And hello, Tanya. Then I found that I had a complete shift of heart, and I spent several years retraining as a doula, as an NCT teacher, as a baby-wearing instructor, and later on as a healer. And all of this came together. And as part of my doula work, I was introduced to the art of using the Rebozo, and I'll tell you more about the Rebozo in a minute, for supporting women during birth. And I've come to realize it's much bigger, it's a much broader use than just using it during childbirth. And therefore I got the desire to pass this on, because it's not just a tool that you can use during childbirth. It's something you can use for yourself, your children, your husband, your partner, your family, of course pregnant, birthing and postnatal women and their babies as well. So what I'm going to be talking about for the next 45 minutes or so is give you a bit of background about what a Rebozo is, and I really would like to move away from calling it a Rebozo, because for me it's more about using shawls and scarves and any piece of fabric to support yourself and support women and anybody really. And I keep on calling it a Rebozo because if I say using shawls, I don't think people will know what I'm talking about, but more and more I realize it's more universal than that. So I'll give you some background about that in a minute, and then I'll talk to you about why it's such a useful tool, and why it's such a useful tool for parents and for the people who support parents expecting birthing and new parents. And I'll also talk to you about the techniques you can use and demonstrate some techniques, about techniques you can use during pregnancy, and techniques you can use during birth, techniques you can use during the postnatal period, techniques you can use to soothe and calm a baby, and techniques you can use also for anybody, regardless whether they are a man or woman, a child, whether they're pregnant or not. So I would like to tell you more, at the end of this talk, I would like to tell you a bit more about some further learning you can have. And I will be posting some links under this video so you can follow this through if you'd like to. So what is a Rebozo? Well, this is a Rebozo. Here's one. It's one of my favorite one. It's very, very special to me, this one, because it's helped me give birth to quite a few. It's not helped me give birth. It helped women give birth to their babies in quite a few occasions. So a Rebozo is a shawl. A tradition, the Rebozo, the actual original Rebozo is a shawl from Mexico, and as many things like shawls and scarves, it's a very, very versatile tool, and it's something that women would have used as a piece of clothing, would have used to keep warm, would have used to carry loads, would have used to hello Helen, would have used to carry babies, would have used to do all sorts of activities. And there is also, I've been told that traditionally women it would be used as a shroud, and women would be buried with a Rebozo. So when I first learned about Rebozo, for me it was just this, the Mexican traditional shawl. Hello, Anne Marie. And then I started, because of my baby wearing background and because I'm a very nosy person and I like asking a lot of questions, I started asking people, do you have a piece of fabric? Do you have a scarf, something you use during birth, you use in the postnatal period to wrap women's hips? And I basically started, asking everybody I met, and being the weird lady who follow African lady in the school playground saying, do you use that? And I found that it's not just a Mexican practice. I found that the use of a shawl or scarf to support women during childbirth and the postnatal period and beyond is a totally universal phenomenon, and it's not at all restricted to South America, contrary to what people believe. I remember having a particularly interesting experience around that when a lady I trained into a postnatal massage called Closing the Bone, she was a lady from Morocco, and when she went back home and started offering the massage to her community back home in Morocco, women said to her, well, I've had that in a hammam. The hammam is a traditional Moroccan, it's a bit like a Turkish bath, but it's a traditional Moroccan bath that women have. And there is, like I said, a really universal thing. I met a Somalian midwife who told me in Somalia they have a shawl called a garbasa, and they use it in exactly the same way as a rebozo to support women during childbirth. And just like baby wearing, the use of fabric for all sorts of different uses, different roles, is something that's totally exists worldwide. And I believe we have some evidence, at least, of that in the UK, in the sense that there are pictures from the 1950s of women carrying their babies in the traditional Welsh shawl or the Scottish plaid. So I'm sure there were similar things being done. Hot countries tend to have very thin cloth. So, for instance, this is an Indonesian baby wearing wrap, and it's made of very thin cotton fabric. And then cold countries would have had, woolen shawl like the Welsh shawl. So, why is it so useful to use a scarf or a shawl or a rebozo to support and comfort people? It's because that's completely my theory, but I believe that rebozo techniques fall into two categories, which are either the wrapping techniques or the rocking techniques. And both of those techniques elicit very primal sensation, as in reminding us of being in the womb. So being rocked is incredibly soothing, but being wrapped is incredibly soothing. So think about babies being rocked and babies being wrapped, being swaddled, and that kind of thing. Well, adults react the same way. Everybody finds, I don't know if you've ever been in a hammock, but being rocked in a hammock is just incredibly calming. And so I believe that as a species, we exist into two different types of behavior, extreme opposite behaviors, states of being rather than behaviors. One of which is the rest and relaxation state, which is our normal state, and one of which is a fight or flight state. And we're not meant to be in fight or flight for any long lengths of time because it's very stressful for our bodies. But to help people come back to a rest and relaxation state, the wrapping and rocking action of a scarf or shawl like the rebozo can be a lot more powerful, achieve that state a lot quicker than if you do just breathing technique or things like that, because it brings people back into their bodies, and it just they are being taken care of, they feel nurtured and that kind of things, which makes a really, really big difference a lot quicker than if you were just using relaxation techniques. So why is it useful for parent supporters like doulas and therapists? Is because it has several advantages. It's very easy to use, it's very versatile, it's less demanding on your body than using your hands. So for instance, when you rock somebody's hips using a rebozo, you use far less force than if we were trying to rock. Imagine trying to rock somebody's hips with your hands. When you use the rebozo and you're at a distance from the person's body, the rebozo acts as a lever, and so you need to move your hands far less than you would. And the person feels cupped and wrapped and rocked at the same time, so it has a much more powerful effect. It provides touch without touch, if that makes sense. So you can provide the sensation of being gently rocked and wrapped, but without direct touch onto the person, which adds a sort of level of removal that can make things a lot more safe and comfortable for women for all sorts of reasons. It just is incredibly versatile, and I tell expectant parents, as a doula I gift expectant parents a Rebozo, but when I was teaching NCT classes I used to bring a whole bunch of pashminas, and I'll tell you more about that later, how you don't have to use a Rebozo, how you can use all sorts of pieces of fabric. If you're a birth geek like me, chances you will want to use an actual Rebozo, because it becomes very special, and you know it's been designed for that purpose. Originally it has the right kind of weave and strengths and that kind of things. But you can use all sorts of pieces of fabric. So I always tell expectant parents to pack a pashmina or scarf in their birth bag, because this is the single most versatile tool that they can use. So what can you use? So this is a bit where I start demonstrating some techniques. So how can you use a Rebozo or scarf to support a woman while she's pregnant? And this is a bit where I've got to show you some demonstration, but I need to give you a bit of background. So I'm going to talk about 3 techniques here, one of which is wrapping the hips, one of which is wrapping the bump, and the third technique is called sifting the bump. Sifting the bump I won't be able to demonstrate per se, because I'm not able to do it on myself, but wrapping and wrapping the belly and wrapping the hips I can show you. So I need to give a little caveat. So it's not unusual for women who are pregnant to experience discomfort in their pelvis, and if they do, whilst wrapping the hips I provide some relief, and I've had some incredible stories with that. I remember this woman earlier this year who bought a Rebozo on my shop, saying that she had really painful hips in her pregnancy, and I sent her the Rebozo, and I sent her the YouTube video that shows what I'm going to show you in a minute, which is to wrap your hips. And she sent me this picture of herself the next day saying, oh my God, this is the first time I can walk around without crying in pain for weeks, you know. And that was just incredible. That was just so validating how powerful a simple piece of cloth can be. So, but what I want to say is, if you have painful pelvis during pregnancy, something like, for instance, like pelvic girdle pain, the Rebozo wrapping will not fix the problem. It will just give you some form of relief, and not to everybody. Some women have the type of pelvic girdle pain that might be made worse by wrapping their hips, which is why I always tell women, try it, see how it feels. If it feels good, then you can use it. So it's not a panacea, it's not going to fix things, but it can be a very good way to provide comfort and support whilst awaiting treatment. By the way, if you have pelvic girdle pain, the way to get it treated is to see a body worker, like a chiropractor or an osteopath who's skilled in treating pregnant women, and they can make sure that your pelvis is functioning the way it should again, and that should really make a huge difference in your comfort and alleviating the pain. So I'm going to move this. I'm going to show you how to use a Rebozo to wrap your hips. So what you want to do is put the Rebozo around. I'm going to move this a little bit more. So put the Rebozo around either just around your buttocks or just in a tight band, just around your hips. So you want the Rebozo to go just above your hip bone here, just below your hip bone here. And what you're going to do is simply cross it, tighten it as much as you can, twist it, and then just tuck the edges into the Rebozo, and the friction of the fabric, because it's quite grippy, will be enough to keep the fabric so that it stays put. And that itself provides a great deal of stability and comfort to the pelvis. It feels great for me, even though I'm not pregnant. By the way, if you're pregnant, and I'll show you how, with a fake bump in a minute, but if you're pregnant, obviously you just wrap below the bump. You don't wrap the bump in this particular technique. But I recommend you try it. Even if you're not pregnant, I recommend you try this technique, because I find it just incredibly comforting, and I find once I've worn it for a bit, I don't really want, when I take it off, I want to put it back on. So I just want to show you how to wrap the bump. So here I'm going to put a fake bump inside my top, just so I can demonstrate that. And something important about the wrapping techniques is that it's a treatment, so don't do it 24/7 because it would stop your ligaments and muscles from doing their job. But if you use it as a treatment, as in like mindfully when you need it, like I said to women, if you need to go for a walk, if you know it will help your comfort, then use it at that time. You know, don't use it all day long. Just use it when you need it. So I said, you know, if you have a big pregnancy bump and you want to wrap your hips, you just wrap the hips under the bump like this. I'm just checking if somebody else asked a question. I was just indicating that some people are watching. And then you can wrap the bump like this. So gather the rebozo and do the same thing that we just did on the hip, which is twist and tuck the fabric. So what you're trying to do here is providing support to the bottom of the bump. So you don't need to wrap the whole bump like this, for instance. You want to just provide support to the lower segment of the bump, so that there's less weight. It sort of alleviates some of the weight. And if you have a longer rebozo, you can even, this one is not quite long enough, but you can even cross both straps and bring them, if they were long enough, you can bring them under the fabric and tuck it. I will put some link that shows you some pictures how to do this at the end of this video, underneath this video. So these are two of the wrapping during pregnancy, and not only during pregnancy. I find them incredibly useful outside of pregnancy. They just, obviously the bump, the wrapping you don't do when you're not pregnant, but the hip wrapping, I recommend anybody tries it. And then the third technique that you can use during pregnancy. Hello, Megan. The third technique you can use for pregnancy is called the bump sifting. This is a picture that shows you how it's done. So what you have is a woman who's on her hands and knees, and you wrap the rebozo around a bump so that it covers the whole of the bump. And what you do is you stand behind her and you lift the whole of the weight of the bump of her spine. So you need some feedback for that. You need to ask the woman, is all the weight gone off your spine? And she says yes. And then once you've done that and you lifted all the weight of her spine, you gently move your hands like if you were riding a bike with your hand to impart a very, very gentle jiggling to the bump. And that usually feels incredible. I have yet to meet a pregnant woman who didn't love this technique. And what it does beyond the sort of gentle relaxation is because it takes all the weight of the muscles and ligaments that are around the pelvis and uterus, it gives them a chance to rebalance themselves. And often when women are uncomfortable in pregnancy, they say that just doing that for 5 minutes or even 2 minutes increases their level of comfort. It also gives a chance to the baby to position themselves in a really good position. So this is something I teach to all the pregnant women I work with. I teach their partner how to do it. It's very, very easy. Anybody can do it. And I find that when you do that every day, you know, the odds that the baby is in a good position is much higher. And I have also found that couples whose baby was in a less than optimal position have often reported the baby turning into a better position just by doing this technique. Like sometimes only once, and that sort of the baby turned and got itself into a much better position. So that's pregnancy. So what about labor? I mean, there are many, many techniques. Sorry, just one thing, I'm backtracking a little bit. So I will put some links underneath this live feed that tell you where you can learn more about the techniques. And one of the links in particular is a PDF file with 3 techniques, which you can just download for free from my website. And in there is a video showing you that I have taken that shows you how to do the belly sifting. So you don't need to worry, oh, Sophie just showed me how to do it on a picture, it doesn't show me how to do it. There is a very detailed video that shows you how to do that. So now when we're moving on to techniques you can use for birth, well, pretty much it's the same as what I was talking about earlier. You can use the techniques to, you can use them for wrapping, and you can use them for rocking. And just generally speaking, hi Sandra, just generally speaking, the rocking and the wrapping provide huge level of comfort, and depending on what's going on, you can apply movement to the wrap with using the feedback from the mother as to what's feel comfortable. So by the way, I should have said the rocking technique is something that is really useful during pregnancy as well. Not just on the bump, for instance, you can rock any part of the body, and you can wrap any part of the body. So when I say it's not just for you, it's not just for your clients, it's for yourself. Is that, for instance, you can use a Rebozo like this, and there's a video on my YouTube channel that shows you how to do a whole routine, but you can use a Rebozo to massage the upper part of your back, or you can use it to massage tight, tense shoulders, and it's something I've done a lot when I've been at birth, supporting long births, and I've done it for myself. You can use techniques like if you just wrap somebody's shoulders. So I'm going to do it on myself to show you. Then imagine that somebody else is doing that to you, but if you just wrap and pull down, you wrap the upper part of the shoulders, just try not to wrap the neck, and just pull down. It's incredibly calming and grounding, because it makes people come back in their body, and also the tightness about the upper part of the chest makes you breathe more into your abdomen, and that's very, very calming and grounding. So I use this technique on pregnant women or birthing women, but I also use it very successfully on my kids when they're grumpy or upset, and I use it very successfully on my husband when he's had a bad day at work. So it's not just about, like I said, birthing and situation like that. And same with the rocking. So if you rock the hips, which is a technique that's you can find on that PDF I was talking about. Hello, Katrina. I find that if you rock the hips, for instance, of a pregnant woman who's standing, just for a few minutes, it's incredibly calming and relaxing. And that's my technique of choice to use when mothers go overdue, and I put overdue because with quotation mark, because I don't believe that women are overdue. The babies come when they're ready, and women just are, women and babies work together, and the babies come when ready. But when a woman is very stressed about waiting for the baby to come, giving it a little bit of gentle rocking of the pelvis where she stands up against the wall. Usually I find I do that for a while, and whilst I chat to the women about the frustration of waiting for the baby to arrive, and I found it as just very, very powerful calming effects, and usually the woman feels a lot more patient. Hello Liz, hello Satu. The woman feels a lot more patient waiting for the baby to arrive if she has means of feeling relaxed and calm and grounded. So there are many, in fact hundreds of techniques you can use during childbirth. So I'm not going to talk about them all, but basically mostly the technique that you do, that you move the mother so that she can find more relaxation and comfort, or you use it for herself to have a sense of her own strength and power. So for instance, some of the techniques are completely passive, like pulling on the Rebozo that's hooked behind the door frame. Some of the technique you can use, again, just to let the mother pull on the Rebozo while she's pushing her baby out, which really helps her feel her own power and engage her core muscles. There are techniques that are quite soft like that, where you're not really doing anything but providing a passive things to resist against, pull against, be supported against. So for instance, this one, the reason this Rebozo is very special for me is because at least I can think of at least 4 births where I've used it. Usually I let the partner do that because it can be a bit hard work, but also it's nicer if they are doing it together rather than me doing it. I only do it when I'm the only person supporting the women. But if you wrap a Rebozo just around the partner's shoulders or your shoulders, and what you can do is then stand up and give the women the end of the fabric to pull against while she squats. So for some reason I seem to always be doing this whilst the woman's in a birthing pool. That is if she's been pushing for a while and the baby's not coming, and the midwives are starting to be a bit worried about the length it's taking. Because by default, I need to say that I do not recommend doing anything unless it's needed. That is, by first do nothing. If the woman giving birth well on their own, she doesn't need your help, don't go and help her. But if she does need, hello Emma, if she does need support, then that's a really good way of doing it in a way that is more empowering than the woman being told push now, because she can feel herself how much more power she's got when pulling on it. So there are lots of techniques that are just rocking and wrapping and just giving the woman some comfort. One of the famous techniques you can use during childbirth is called shaking the apple. So when a woman's really tensing up and she's finding the contraction hard to cope with, you can jiggle her buttocks or legs using a Rebozo. And the jiggling makes it impossible for muscles to tense up, and therefore usually makes labor a lot more comfortable. I'm just reading what Liz is saying right now. We live in a society that doesn't like to wait for anything. Yeah, that's very true. When it comes to babies, they are even less patient to wait. The pressure is unbelievable. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love using this, because it's if it's between that and doing some kind of major intervention like forceps, often I have found this is a technique that will save the day. That's where it's complicated to balance the thing between, first do nothing. So I always say to people, first do nothing, but if somebody said, oh, well, if that baby doesn't come within the next 10 minutes, we need to do forceps, then get all Rebozo blazing. This is about context. If everything's going as it should, there's no rush, the woman's well, the baby's well, and everybody's happy, then you don't need to use your Rebozo. But when it's that between that and a major intervention, then it's definitely worth trying techniques like this. I'm not saying it will always work, but it's well worth it. And I sort of want to tell you one of my favorite stories about this, because in a couple of months ago, and I have permission to share this from my client. My client is called Carolina, and she's an absolutely lovely lady from Argentina. And Carolina was planning a VBAC at home. So she had a cesarean with her first baby because he was breech, and then she ended up planning a home birth for her second child. And the home birth was the longest I've ever been at. It lasted for 4 days, and I have never used so many techniques that I had in the book than I did in that birth. On the sort of second days we use, or the end of the first days, I can't quite remember when it goes on for 4 days. It all get muddled up in my head, but I used some techniques that involve lifting the bump, using a Rebozo to help engage the baby in the pelvis. And then on the 4th day, when she got into real strong labor and suddenly got this what we call the stuck at 6 situation, that is, she had been dilated for 6 centimeters for hours and wasn't progressing. I discussed this with the midwife, got some information about the position of the baby, and then suggested something I'd learnt about but I'd never actually practiced during labor, which is getting Carolina in an inverted position, so that is knees on the sofa and head down, so with the bum in the air. And with the help of her husband and the other doula that was there as well, my friend Becky, we proceeded to, during contraction, to sift her bottom, so do shaking the apples on the bottom very vigorously while she was having contractions. And we did that for maybe 3 or 4 contractions, and when she came back up, she said, my back doesn't hurt anymore. And then the midwife came and confirmed the baby had adopted a much better position, and she had that baby 4 hours later in the pool in her house. And I tell you, there wasn't a dry eye in the room when that happened. And I actually, for the first time in my life, I laughed and cried at the same time when the baby was born. And I've no doubt that the technique made all the difference, that if we hadn't helped, if we hadn't done what we did at the time that we did, she may well have ended up with a repeat cesarean. So this simple movement, because anybody can do it, simple techniques like jiggling, rocking, wrapping during labor, they can make the difference between a woman having some major obstetric intervention and a woman having a really lovely, straightforward vaginal birth, which is one of the reasons why I feel so driven to pass on all this knowledge to people, because I'm quite surprised that since it's so powerful. Well, should I say I'm surprised? That's so on one hand, I'm surprised since it's so powerful it is not known, but on the other hand, because I come from a scientific background and I know that our culture values technology over nature massively. Yesterday I was reading a book and I read the term technolust, which described the absolute obsession with technology we have in our culture. And so, in the world we live in, it's not surprising that medical professionals would think that you coming with that and saying that can help labor versus some kind of machine that goes ping. It's not surprising that people will have difficulty believing that it does what it says on the tin, but there is a lot of anecdotal evidence to back that up. And in fact, all the techniques that you can use during childbirth, they were developed by traditional midwives from the days that technology wasn't there. So people just had to make do with ways of fixing things and making things improve and progress. I'm just reading what Megan says. I would be nervous I'd get baby into a less than optimal position, especially using full inversion. How do I overcome that worry? So when I did the spinning babies training with Gail Tully, she explained that when you do a short inversion, you cannot get the baby within a good position into a bad position. It's very different if you do a 20-minute inversion, what is called a bridge tilt, which is something you do for 20 minutes with a board, where the women, when you want to turn a bridge baby in pregnancy, but just doing an inversion for a few minutes will not get a baby within a good position into a less optimal position. So that's I hope that answers your worry, Megan. So now I want to talk to you about techniques you can use during the postnatal period. And I'm going to rant a bit because this is one of my favorite topics. But I was very lucky in 2013 to be introduced to a technique called closing the bones by a shaman and traditional midwife from Ecuador called Dr. Rocio Alarcon. I went to a retreat, a doula retreat, and I learned these techniques. And it grew sort of very organically. Maddie McMahon and I, we learned the technique together. We started teaching it to our community, and then people asked us to show them, and it grew from a small informal thing into something that we've now trained over 350 people in doing this technique in the UK, and beyond. There are people who have come from abroad as well. It's a postpartum massage that involves rocking with a rebozo, but also an extensive massage of the abdomen and hip and chest at a different level. That is designed to help a new mother come back to herself and her center. And what Rocio explained is on a physical, emotional and spiritual level, women need to open to give birth, and that it needs to be helped to be closed back after she's given birth, because if you do not, the woman goes around feeling unstable and leaking energy. And I find it absolutely fascinating that we give birth, we grow a whole new human being in an organ that grows from the size of a pear to the size of a watermelon and back down again. And that nobody makes sure that all the pelvic and abdominal organs have gone back where they belong in a kind of balanced way after the birth. I can tell you that if men gave birth, there would probably be a technique on the NHS available to make sure they're okay after they've done this amazing feat. But here in the UK, pretty much of the Western world, we've got nothing. Absolutely nothing, and all the focus is entirely towards the baby rather than the mother. So nobody makes sure if the mother's okay. None of the presents are for the mother; they're all for the baby. And doing closing the bone has led me to want to provide a change in our culture around that the nurturing should go towards the mother, because the baby doesn't care about the baby grows and the stuffed bears and the flowers. And the mother cannot eat those. And so what women need in the postpartum is rest and good food and nurturing, and basically what we used to have in this country and still available in many parts of the world, which is a whole month's baby moon, where they don't do any housework and they don't do any cooking, and people are just rallying around. And there is some element of body work everywhere. Again, it's a universal thing. So what I found is closing the bone is not just an Ecuadorian thing, it's not just a Mexican thing, it's not just a Moroccan thing, it's something that seems to be pretty much universal as well. There is some kind of body work that is specific to the postpartum period, pretty much all around the world. It's just that in the West we've lost it, and in fact it's lost very, very quickly because people favor more modern techniques. So closing of the bones, it's the idea is to provide a ritual for the mother to feel really nurtured, and I cannot demonstrate it for you, but I just want to show you a picture here where you can see a woman wrapped up with 5 different rebozos from head to toe. It's not just that is not as simple as it is the closing of the bone, because like I said, there's rocking and a massage and all sorts of technique, but at the end of the massage especially if there's a group of women, you can organize a group process like that, where the woman is held and nurtured by a whole group of women. And it's incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly nurturing for the women, and it's incredibly powerful not just for the women but for everybody else who's there. So one of the things I love to facilitate is to facilitate mother blessings instead of baby showers. So the mother blessing is a baby shower, but the focus is on the mother, and then get all the women to come back after the baby's born to help close her bones. And Maddie McMahon and I, who teach it, we film a video which should be ready within the next few weeks. It needs to be edited and music added and stuff, but we film a video that shows the whole rose in the bone process we did together on a lovely local doula friend of ours called Cecilia, who had a baby about 6 months ago. And you'll get to see, I will post it on this group, you'll get to see what it looks like when it's ready. Just reading what Liz is saying, nurture, love and kindness, we are so lacking it. Yes, that's very, very true. So postpartum you can do closing the bone, but you can also do simple things like the wrapping and the wrapping of the hips that I showed you earlier. It's really useful for postpartum women, not just for pregnant women, because it helps them feel contained and come back to themselves. And then, last but not least, techniques that we use for adults, like rocking and wrapping, we can use for babies. So we can use the Rebozo to wrap the baby, much like you would wrap with a swaddle. And we can use the Rebozo to gently rock the baby on the floor. And then we can use the Rebozo to a baby. First thing you can do, which is put it on your shoulder and then knot it where your hip bone is, like this. So it's a very, very simple way of carrying a baby. So you make a nice strong double knot just about where the top of your hip bone is. And what you do is you swing that knot on your back, and what you've got is a pouch for the baby. So I'm going to take a baby here. And the baby goes on my shoulder, very much like if I was going to burp the baby, and I slide a hand through and gently slide the feet of the baby through the pouch. So the baby is sitting on it like a rope. And then I'm going to gently bring the top of the pouch up to the baby's neck. And then you can see here I've got a lot of slack. So to take care of that slack, I'm just going to fold the fabric. And there you've got it, a very, very simple carry that you can use to carry and comfort a baby. So it doesn't have to be complicated. Find myself carrying children with scarves, and Megan says my toddler adores being sifted. She can't help but giggle. Yeah, kids love it, grumpy kids, stressed kids, upset kids. I've wrapped my daughter. My daughter says sometimes when she's upset, I said, "You want some Reiki?" So I'm a Reiki healer, so I offer that, and she said, "No, I want some Rebozo." And the rocking and the wrapping, kids absolutely adore it. And there's lots of people who've done the training with me who've said that it's especially helpful with kids who have like ADHD or sensory processing disorder, that it grounds them and calms them in a way that nothing else does. The wriggling of the screen, I'm just going to remove my baby from my Rebozo here. So I just want to tell you a bit more about what you can do, what you can use. So like I said earlier, you don't have to use a Rebozo, and actually for some parents it might be more empowering to know that they don't have to use a Rebozo, because birth geeks like me love the real thing, but parents don't see the point of spending 30 or 40 pounds on a special scarf if they have a perfectly good one in their cupboard that they can use. And so to empower people to realize they do not need anything special, that they can use pretty much anything, and to be creative yourself. So I remember my friend Maddie told me how she went to see a newborn mother, and she hadn't planned on closing her bone, so she hadn't brought a Rebozo, and the women really needed it, so she used olive oil from the kitchen and a towel to do the Rebozo, to do the closing of the bones. So if you like the idea of having a Rebozo, by all means get a Rebozo, and I'll tell you about on my website there. I have started importing them because I never intended to it grow very organically. People kept on saying, where can I buy some? There wasn't anybody selling them in the UK. It was kind of hard to get hold of. And so I started bringing them to my workshop and then thought I'm not going to sell them online because I don't want to do that. But then it grew to the point that enough people knew I had them that I was constantly being asked, do you have any Rebozo? So I eventually bit the bullet about 6 months ago and put the Rebozos on my website, and I now have got something like 5 different suppliers in South America. Liz says closing the bone is a big hug that says to the women, you are loved, you are amazing, you are wonderful. It brings closing on many levels. For women who have suffered from loss, who have had surgery. I also used the Rebozo on my son, who had gone through a really hard time. He asked me the other night for that Rebozo thing. I have used it on a 28-year-old man, and it works. Yeah, it's useful for anybody. And you don't take my word for it, because like many of those things, I believe that unless you've experienced it, you can't really tell what it's like until you've had it. And from time to time I have it and I thought I knew, and every time it brings me different things. So I really recommend make sure you have it for yourself, because again, birth workers were usually really good at giving and really pretty crap at receiving, and we should, walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And if we're going to tell our clients about self-care, we need to make sure that we do self-care to ourselves too. So back to what can you use. So of course you can use a Rebozo, you can use a pashmina, any type of scarf, as long as it's strong enough. So you don't want to use anything flimsy or anything too slippery, because they won't grip and they won't work so well. You can use baby-wearing wraps, the woven kind. The very long ones might be a bit faffy, like the 4.5 meter ones might be a bit faffy to use, but they still work. Might be easier with a slightly shorter one. And you can use, like I said, towel. And there's a published scientific article on the use of Rebozo for correcting fetal malposition online. And in there, because of hospital infection control protocol, they actually ended up using some. Just excuse me 1 second. Somebody's at the door. You can end up using, in that hospital setting, they ended up using bedding, like bed sheets from the hospital beds, because they have to be able to boil wash things. And also that if they did have Rebozos and things like that, when they went to the hospital general laundry, then they would most likely actually be disappearing. That's what happened to my local hospital. They bought baby-wearing wrap to use for women to pull on, to hook them up on the hook in the ceiling so women could pull on them during childbirth. And when they went to the general hospital laundry, they didn't come back. So being creative, if you're in a hospital setting and using stuff that is in plentiful supply, you're not going to worry it's going to get damaged or lost, and it can be boil wash. It's a big advantage. So now is the bit where I tell you what, if you want to learn more, so what are the options? So if you want to learn more, that, like I said, I will put my website link and more links under this video, but on my website there is a free download of 3 techniques and pictures and videos that you can use during pregnancy. And then there is I have made my real life course, I'll tell you about that in a minute, available as an ebook, which you can download from my website. And finally, at the end of June this year, I made my live course available as an online course. And I'm very excited about that, because it means it's much more accessible to more people all across the world. And it means that, if I can't travel to people, then you can do the online course. And then there is, of course, the real life course. So I offer a live Rebozo course, and I offer a live Closing the Bone course. And there's obviously got a slightly different focus, but if you can find when I've next plan to go travel and do this course on my website. And then finally, as I said earlier, there is a Rebozo shop on my website where there's Rebozo that come from Mexico, Guatemala, and different parts of Mexico, and also from Guatemala. And I have made a big effort to make sure they are produced ethically, and that the artisans who make them are paid a fair wage. And so you can have a look at what there is there if you'd like to acquire one. And I think this is it, unless anybody has any more question to ask. I think they've covered everything, and I've managed to stick to 45 minutes, but pretty much if you want to find more information, you can go to my website www.sophiemessager.com, and I will put a link on the comments section after this video. Thank you very much for listening to me. Bye!